My name is Gilbert Kliman. I'm a child psychiatrist, a child analyst, and a provider of therapy and forensic consultations. I'm based in San Francisco, where I direct the Children's Psychological Health Center. I want to thank Dr. Nahara and the Carter-Jenkins Center for inviting me and giving me the privilege of talking to you about reflective network therapy, a rather novel form of therapy to most of you. Since 1965, I've been practicing what I now call reflective network therapy. It has also been called the cornerstone method. Reflective network therapy harnesses social networks, sometimes very small social networks, on behalf of children who are traumatized, disturbed, or developmentally disordered. Tonight I'd like to tell you about two forms of reflective network therapy which harness social networks. You are probably seeing on your screens a picture of me at work in an unusual office. It is a refugee camp in which 200 people out of 500 living in the camp have assembled to speak with me at the request of the parents and the committee of parents which has been elected by the 500 members to represent them. I will come back to this picture later because it represents a rather new application of reflective network therapy. Reflective network therapy is something I designed originally for preschoolers, and I'd like to talk to you about that. Thanks to Dr. Nahara and the Carter-Jenkins Center, you can link to the Children's Psychological Health Center website and learn a good deal about reflective network therapy in preschool settings and elsewhere. I invite you to write to us at that link or to Gilbert Kliman 2008 at gmail.com and request confidentiality agreements so that you can see videos of reflective therapy at work in preschool settings. Why would I want you to do that? It's because I think our agency has discovered a method for treating very disturbed or traumatized children and perhaps adolescents and maybe adults, which is more powerful and more economical than other applications of therapy to several populations. In particular, we're quite surprised at the results we're having in therapeutic preschools which treat autism spectrum disordered children. I invite you to look on our website where one of our child patients from 33 years earlier describes her experiences and her memories of being an autistic person at age a little under 3, going through several years of treatment in a therapeutic preschool, using reflective network therapy with herself, her peers, the teachers, and an analyst in the classroom. She has a remarkable response to the network of persons reflecting upon her status as an autistic and mentally retarded child. She rose gradually out of mental retardation and autistic whirling, twirling, withdrawal, and non-use of words into an articulate, intelligent, finally a vivacious, vibrant, and very full person who has had a good romantic life, good parenting life, and has, despite the genetic penetration of her disorder into the next generation, where her daughter needed to be treated for an autistic spectrum disorder, she has succeeded as a parent, and her daughter has done well also. We have traced her disorder back several generations, yet it responded, despite its clear genetic origin and its clear expression of genes through traumatic influences. It responded to an interpersonal psychotherapy in the classroom, which was an application of child analysis. I invite you to read my book called Reflective Network Therapy in the Preschool Classroom, published by University Press of America and available on Amazon.com as a paperback or Kindle for instant download. In that book, you will find a manual for carrying out a treatment of preschoolers in their classrooms by a method which I will now briefly describe, a method which is manualized in the book called Reflective Network Therapy in the Preschool. Briefly, the method involves collecting 6 or 8 preschool patients in a classroom with 2 teachers and a therapist. It involves parent guidance every week for each of the children's parents, and an open invitation and encouragement for the parents to be in the classroom a great deal of the time, or all of the time if they wish or need. Each child is a patient, identified as a patient in the classroom. This is truly a treatment classroom, as I'm now defining it, although it may take place in a public special education school. In fact, 1,700 children have been treated by this method, and many of them were in public special education day classes. In order to carry out the method, each child must have a time in the classroom for an appointment right there in the real-life setting of the classroom. The appointment takes place for 15 or 20 minutes every day with the psychotherapist, who may be an intern, a fully trained psychoanalyst, or somebody with skills in between. The therapist must be briefed before each appointment by a teacher in the classroom and the child, who together, sometimes together with the parent, explain in a couple of minutes what the child has been doing in the classroom. Armed with that knowledge, which is given in public to a group of children, teachers, parents, and therapists, the child and therapist then have what looks like a private psychotherapy session, with the great exception that it is entirely not private. It is, in fact, taking place right in the classroom, where everyone in the classroom is privy to what is happening, what is said, what is done, what is played about. And if the index child of the moment permits, other children in the classroom may participate under the index child's direction, so they may become part of the play and communication of that child. They may take roles in action. They may help in building structures, in painting, in telling stories, when the therapist in the classroom is doing this play session with his index patient, he is constantly hovering over every word, every action, and putting those observations into a stream of verbally expressed mentalizations of his own, in which he expresses what he thinks the child is doing and saying, and he may occasionally, or she may occasionally, make an interpretation to the child. The reactions of the child to the interpretation may often be evident. Commonly, one of the parents is operating a video camera, and we have thus hundreds of hours of such sessions on tape, which we are subjecting to research. After the session is over, there is what is called a debriefing as part of the reflective network therapy. The debriefing involves the child and the therapist telling the teacher what they did for a quarter of an hour or 20 minutes, and they try to do that in a minute or two. The child is urged to be helpful in remembering what the session was about and putting it into words. Other children may say, well, you forgot to tell about how we knocked the building over. The therapist then goes on to another child, gets a briefing from that new child and the teacher about this next patient and the appointment. The appointment goes on like a 15 or 20 minute brief therapy session with other children privy to it, participating if the child allows. And then there's another debriefing. This goes on hundreds and hundreds of times during a school year. It may, under ideal circumstances, happen every day with every patient in the therapeutic classroom. Right now, as we speak, today, on the 26th of October 2012, this method is being practiced at the Ann Martin Center in Oakland, California, at the Walnut Lake Preschool in Detroit, Michigan, where Nancy Blyden is the analyst in charge. It's being practiced at the Cambridge Ellis Preschool in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where Alexandra Harrison is the analyst in charge. It has, from time to time, been carried out by Catherine Henderson at the Seattle agency called the Wellspring and Morning Song Preschool. It has been carried out at the Center for Preventive Psychiatry in New York for decades. For 4 years at the Buenos Aires Cornerstone Preschool. And we hope that through the distribution of tapes like this one and the vivid, real treatment sessions which you may obtain through a confidentiality agreement, that many people who study the book on reflective network therapy will want to obtain training and supervision which our agency provides for therapeutic preschools. Now I want to tell you a little bit about the results of that method. We have been following the results in a number of ways. One is microscopic, through the study of videos. We are literally doing 30-second interval analyses of videos using a 28-point inventory. We have begun to notice there is a tranquilizing effect on the children during the course of a quarter of an hour or 20 minutes session, so that in particular when the children have a successful treatment, we can detect in their individual sessions that there's a difference from the beginning to the end of a 20-minute session, and that is in their motility. There also is apparently quite a responsiveness amongst successful cases to interpretation, where the child makes elaborate responses to interpretations. We also see the development not only of transferences in the successful cases, but sometimes of a full-blown transference neurosis, so that for the first time in his clinical life, or perhaps ever in his life, he starts to develop new symptoms such as separation anxiety in relation to separations from the analyst, so that on a Monday he may express thoughts about what the analyst was thinking or what he felt as a child during the weekend. Over long vacations, we have some video evidence of transferential processes which are quite profound, such as imagining the state of mind of the analyst as very worried about the child. These artificial neuroses, which we call transference neuroses, are a product of treatment, and they're correlated with a powerful outcome. How else do we measure the outcome? Well, one way we measure it is quite unusual, and that is by changes in IQ. I'm going to make an effort to bring up a slide which you'll find in my book, but there's in particular a slide I want to show you about how IQ varies with the number of sessions. Having difficulty because I'm a Mac guy, and this is a PC I'm using, but you can see something very orderly happening here in a study of 10 highly treated children in a San Mateo classroom where they were seen almost every day for 8 months by an analyst. They had 2 standard deviation rise of IQ, whereas on, that's 28 points, a huge gain of IQ, whereas on the bottom of the scale, to the far left of the graph, is a group of control patients in a similar diagnostic status, autism spectrum disorders, who were in a regular special education class, and as not uncommonly happens, they had a slight decline of IQ over the school year, tested by the WIPSI method on 2 occasions, start and then end of treatment. There are many variations in between, but we find that in general psychotherapy of a supportive expressive kind has no effect on IQ, whereas this in-classroom treatment, which is a synergy between education, parent guidance, and interpretive psychotherapy right in a real-life space, there is quite an effect on cognitive function measurable by IQ. Other outcome measures which are very gratifying are the Children's Global Assessment Scale measures, or CGAS, which can be given readily at baseline or start of treatment, and then at several points in treatment, particularly important to do at the end of treatment. We have third-party evaluators who have done the IQs and the CGAS and report to us this is a highly significant observation, and one which makes me recommend that children who appear to be obtunded, retarded, antagonistic to learning, unreceptive, might benefit greatly in many settings from reflective network therapy in their actual classrooms, so that instead of being brought to offices, they might have the office brought to them and the therapist brought right into the real school life space. It isn't, however, my intention to rest with this topic. I am a restless and adventurous person, so I want to tell you that if you look on the website of the Children's Psychological Health Center, you will find a number of applications of this method. For example, there was a great earthquake in Sichuan, China. So we created a form of reflective network therapy, which we had already been practicing for a while, in the form of guided activity workbooks, which assembles small social networks on behalf of traumatized children in disasters such as the New Orleans hurricanes, the life of a person or child in Gaza, or a victim of terror attacks in Israel, the attack on America, floods, fires, tornadoes. We had all that experience when there was an earthquake in China, Sichuan, and so we created a workbook there which allowed us to collaborate with Mercy Corps, and 30,000 families used these workbooks in Sichuan, China. People in Mercy Corps were trained by us to use the workbooks. The trainers whom we trained then trained others to use the workbooks. And ultimately, we gave a great deal of Skype supervision to Chinese therapists in creating small networks to hear the narratives of children who were traumatized and to allow the narratives to be mentalized to some extent through the sublimated qualities of the small social network filling in the story of what had happened. Just yesterday, I returned from an application of reflective network therapy in Haiti. We had created a Creole workbook in response to the 2010 January earthquake in Haiti, and several thousand copies were distributed. People were trained at the Massachusetts School of Professional Psychology and elsewhere to use this workbook. Many Haitian people were involved in creating the workbook, and it was used in some schools in Haiti, particularly by Carolyn Hudecourt at her school, where she is a principal of the school in Haiti. This work, fortunately, came to the attention of a Haitian psychologist who was working in refugee camps. Frandy Daniel is his name. He contacted me about 3 weeks ago and said that he was very much inspired by the small network effect of the reflective network therapy as applied in the refugee camps. That unfortunately he had discovered, together with 10 colleagues, that when he listened to the narratives of the children, the girls were telling the psychologists that they were being repeatedly sexually assaulted, raped. Even children as young as 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 were being repeatedly raped in the 6 refugee camps of which he knew. He asked me for some assistance in the form of supervision, guidance, and forensic advice, because one of our agency's biggest tasks is to give forensic in the courtroom assistance by relaying the narratives of traumatized children appropriately in civil litigation. So I gave him some instruction. Our agency gave him some support. And after years of inaction on the part of Haitian justice system personnel in regard to the raping of minors in refugee camps, a very gratifying change occurred in response to Dr. Daniel's interventions. When I instructed him that he should act as a mandated reporter of the narratives of abuse and go directly to the police personally, so that no intervening administration could interfere with, minimize, deny, or avoid responsibility. 175 arrest warrants were issued against predators within that period of a couple of weeks since I began Skyping with Dr. Daniel. 50 predators are now in jail and awaiting trial in a country which hardly ever paid attention to poor girls being raped. Now, it appears there are 10 judges who have opened their courts after correspondence with me to pay attention to the small supportive networks which are reporting that their children are in constant danger. I went to Haiti myself a few days ago and had just returned last night. These are some of the people with whom I created a social network. I went with Dr. Daniel, Frandy Daniel, to a camp which he had not been to before as a therapist or forensic evaluator. And we spoke there at the request of 5 parents who had formed a committee to head the social network and civilian needs of this camp. They told us that they wanted to tell us their story so that we would tell the world about their narrative, about their neglected and endangered and harmed children. I asked them, did they mind if we made videotapes and showed the videotapes to others? No, they wanted that. That's why they wanted me in particular to come to Haiti, because they had heard that I was talking with Dr. Daniel about other camps. They wanted me to come to their camp so their children could tell their stories and be protected. Thus, in this gathering, which you see before you, we learned that the children were feeling free to tell their story of being raped, and 32 of them stood up to tell me that they had been raped in this camp. These were children between ages 6 and 17 who stood up. Some of them talk to me in intimate detail, and this is a father whose fresh wound is shown on image 1665. He wants this shown because he was beaten by predators a few days before I arrived as he tried to chase them away from a stream of contaminated but running water where the children were trying to bathe in the nude. They were rapists, he believed, and they were trying to rape the girls. They beat him on the head, and another man too had a similar wound. The people begged me to tell their story, and the next day I came back and spoke to them, but also spoke in private to the 5 camp leaders and 2 of the children, whose stories are absolutely credible from a forensic point of view and meet all the criteria which David Raskin has set up in the 1990 book by James Doris, published by the American Psychological Association, on children as witnesses. This is not a child whom I'm identifying as a rape victim, but I simply tell you that my heart is still in Haiti with this child, because she got up and talked into the camera and said, and I think she is all of 8 years old, she says, "I want you to know I fear for my baby sister." It's very hard not to weep when seeing these children and their videos, and it is my plan now to go to the United Nations, UNFPA, which has invited a grant application, saying quite openly to me they want our agency to apply for the funds because they think the funds will not be properly used by Haitian organizations who have not listened to the narratives of the children in a way that led to protective action. So they think we can train Dr. Daniel, for sure, and others to be mandated reporters and then mobilize the very thinly spread 10,500 police in the huge population of Haiti, with millions of displaced people living homeless or in plastic tents, which I visited. It's my belief that it is because of my experiences in learning that a network helps me to be a therapist. It is because of my experience with parents, teachers, and peers talking to me about a patient while the patient talks to me about the patient, that I have learned something about listening in a new way, that it is a way in which there is a mirroring of the narrative by supportive others in the immediate network, so that the mirror neurons and the compassion and empathy and the actions of the network are benevolently motivated, activated, and orchestrated by the analytic listener, who then also becomes a fuller person and can then more effectively orchestrate further steps in guiding the families and communities to help the development and safety of the children. So I leave you with that thought, that I hope you will feel free to avail yourself of studying our agency's resources online, our disaster response books, our manual for carrying out a reflective network therapy, which is online and freely downloadable. Now, I particularly want to thank the Carter-Jenkins Center and Dr. Umberto Nahara for inviting me to exercise this privilege of talking with you.